Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U. And today we're going to be talking about how to make money as a screenwriter. Uh, if you're just learning, if all you've done is written maybe one screenplay or you haven't had any success yet, I can understand why someone wouldn't talk about this conversation. But if what you really want to do is succeed, this is part of the game. This is part of the way you want to be thinking. And let me tell you something. When I first came to this industry, I went to a writers group. There were 100 people there. They had a big event going on. And I went around and I sat down at every table and I said, let me ask you a question. How do you make money in this industry? And every table but one shushed me. Now, this is 20 years ago. There is more talk about it right now, but what was interesting to me was they actually thought that was a bad question. They thought that was something that people shouldn't be asking. So when we started Screenwriting U, we did the absolute opposite. I went around and interviewed, we've interviewed over 800 writers in the last 20, or 800 producers in the last 20 years. I've interviewed over 100 A-list screenwriters. And what I was looking for was, what does it take to be successful in a big way? And that's what we've built into everything we've done. Just so everybody knows up front, if you're wondering, did it work? We've had over 600 of our writers make some kind of deal in this industry. Either they got paid for a script, they got optioned, they got a manager or an agent, right? They took a major step that brought them into the industry. And that's possible for you also. So let's jump into it and talk about how to do that. Today, we're going to talk about 7 different ways that screenwriters can make money because it's important that you know them. If you understand all of these, then you will know when opportunities are coming to you. I've had people say to me before, this producer asked me to do X, and then they would say something that they weren't comfortable with, they had never experienced, like do a paid writing assignment or rewrite a script that the producer owned, or do something, redo something in a way that, like, for instance, instead of it being a movie, change it to a television show. All of those would have gotten those writers deals, but they were uncomfortable because they hadn't had any experience or even talked about those things yet. So it's important. If you know all of these different ways, when an opportunity shows up in front of you, you will be much more comfortable taking advantage of it. And that's part of our job here. We'll also talk about how do you get those gigs. And then we'll talk about the upcoming class, the paid writing assignment class, which is a specific model for how you get paid for doing writing assignments for producers. And for this particular class, I think I interviewed about 100 producers specifically on this. We interviewed about 30 A-list screenwriters about how they do paid writing assignments, because just so you know, almost every movie that gets made by an A-list screenwriter that came from an A-list screenwriter was a paid writing assignment. Every Marvel movie you see is, they'll have 4 or 5 different writers who were all paid $500,000 or more to do those particular, or to write those movies. So this is a major part of how you do business as a writer in this industry. So we'll get to that at the end. So let's go. I think this is part of my philosophy. Writers absolutely deserved to get paid for mastering their craft. And there's a lot of issues going on about that at the present moment. But there's no doubt writers are the ones who bring the stories, the characters, the worlds, the dialogue, everything that everybody else does as part of the movie making process. And if you've ever gone to a movie before, and I'm thinking of one particular one that I watched. It was a $100 million movie where the director had stepped in at the very beginning and said, "Oh, I'll go ahead and write it." And the director wrote the movie. It was the most visually interesting movie I've ever seen and the most boring story I have ever seen. Right? And that's because they didn't have a writer involved. They spent $100 million making this movie that the director on the director's job was amazing, but on the writing, he sucked. So again, I think that great writing can save the day, even if the rest of it isn't that good. But if you have average or bad writing in a movie, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. So we're important to this process. We're valuable. We bring the kind of creativity that they need so badly. Now, prerequisites for success here. You need to be able to write screenplays. So for everything I'm talking about here, at minimum, you need to have at least written one screenplay and really understand the whole thing about what it takes to create drama and good dialogue and good characters and all of that kind of thing. But it's more than that. You also need to be able to take notes well. And let's be clear. Outside this industry, there's a lot of people that say, you know, don't let a producer tell you what to do and change your work and stuff like that. And that's by people who are not successful for the most part. I don't see very many A-list screenwriters telling people they don't take notes, because A-list screenwriters do it all the time. It's the people who haven't succeeded that say those kinds of things. Please think about this for a moment. Imagine that you were a producer and you have hired a writer and you're about to go into production, and about 7 things go wrong in production, and you need to change some things, like, oh, we didn't get the big location we thought, or some of the funding dropped out and we're going to have to do this movie for 50% of the budget, or by the way, we lost the big actor, and so we're bringing in this up-and-coming actor who is, instead of 40-year-old male, it's a 18-year-old female, but she's amazing. Now we need to rewrite that character's dialogue and who the character is and all of that. Imagine for a moment if the writer turned to you and said, "No, I refuse to change a word of this script because somebody on some writers group told me that." Right? It's like, first, that's crazy. I'll tell you the second part, and this is important. I've talked with about 70 producers about this, and I said, "So what do you do in that situation?" And they're like, "Well, we've got to go into production. This writer's refusing. We don't have a choice. We're going to have to get somebody in here who can do this. We fire this writer right now and bring another writer on that we've worked with before." And it's like, yeah. We've had that happen now to 4 of our writers. I tell every one of our writers this one thing. I'm going to give you one piece of advice that will change your life in this area. I tell every one of our writers this. We've had 4 that chose not to follow this advice, and all 4 of them got kicked off of their project. Here's the advice. Once you know that your project has even the slightest chance of going into production, your job is to do everything you can to stay on that movie, stay on that project. Here's the reason why. You don't want to end up 30 days before the movie goes into production with the producer firing you, bringing on somebody else who knows they've got to change 50% of this movie to get a credit, because that new writer is going to have to butcher your script. And that's what happened to all 4 of our writers. They watched a script that they loved, that all they had to do was make minor changes, but they listened to somebody who told them this crazy thing of, don't change anything. Don't let the producer tell you what to do, all that kind of thing. And they refused to make the changes, and all 4 of them got fired. And all 4 of them, they brought another writer on who destroyed their script. Now, out of the 4, I was able to get 1 back on the job. It took us almost 6 months. We were lucky. Their funding dropped out. And so they didn't end up going into production. I got our writer back on the job, but she had to go in and show that she was willing to do what it took. So take the notes and stay on the project. That's important. That is critically important. It's your main way to keep control, and it's your main way to make sure that you come out of this thing an incredibly happy writer with a movie that you're proud of. All right. I just wanted to give that safety tip. All right. And then the other thing you need to know is you need to know how to do writing assignments. And the reason for learning writing assignments is 2 things. One is it is about 80% of the income that writers make in this industry. That number comes from the WGA. At one point, I went to them and said, hey, I'm doing this class. I would like to know, pretty much where we are on this, what percentage of income coming to writers who are in the WGA come from writing assignments. And they came back and gave me a number that was over 90%. And I went back to them about 6 years later, and they came back and gave me a number that was in the 80s. So whichever you want to believe on that, just know this: the majority of income in this industry comes from writing assignments. So you really do want to master that process. Now, let's jump into this. Ways to make money as a screenwriter. Number 1, of course, is sell your screenplays. And this, I think anytime a writer can sell their screenplays, there's so many good things that happen. It means first, this has been, all the work you've done has just paid off. Second, it means that there's a really good chance that movie is going to get made, and that's a really good thing. But third, it means you have a higher level of credibility. So when I'm talking about selling your screenplays, the process kind of goes like this. First thing is you option the script to someone. And this is, just really easy. That means that the producer presents you with a contract, you negotiate whatever you're going to negotiate. Somewhere along the way, you both come to agreement, and they make the deal. Now, there's not a lot of money in optioning. There used to be, back in the 90s, you'd get 10% for optioning your script of whatever the full price was going to be. Now it's not that way at all. So you do get something, hopefully, but it's mainly a commitment that they are moving forward and that you have a chance of making it in this industry. Then, on or before the first day of production, you get paid for the script. This is actually where the money is, and I just want to be clear. The real money then comes from getting the movie made, right? And getting paid usually happens right before production. So it's because the movie is going to get made. So once again, another reason it's important for you to stay on the project and to be part of it every step of the way and to do whatever it takes to get it produced. Second possibility is you rewrite scripts that producers own. And again, what this basically means is they already have this script, they own it. They're bringing you in to do a rewrite, and the rewrite may be because of a whole bunch of different reasons. But most of the time, it's because they need something specific to produce it, right? So if they ask you to rewrite a script, and let's say the script is 120 pages, and they say, we need to bring it down to 90. A lot of people don't know that means there's a budget issue here, right? They translate it as, and this is what happens to a lot of writers when When you bring your own script in and the producer says, okay, love your script, we just need to bring it down to 90 pages or 100 or whatever. At that point, a lot of times writers are like, what didn't you like, right? Or they'll fight to keep scenes in or that kind of thing. What's really going on is the producer is trying to get this thing produced and they need to cut budget. So if they cut 20 pages out and you brought this thing down to 90, you know what? They just cut 1/5 of the days that they would be shooting, right? They just cut a lot of possible locations that they would have to move trucks to and unload equipment and all of that kind of thing. And they're just trying to reduce budget. And if you know and understand that, it's no problem at all. But let's go back. Here's when this happens. You end up rewriting a script that someone else wrote because the original writer wouldn't make the improvements in that script to get it produced. And that's sad. That really is. For the 4 writers that I had who refused to make improvements, they were in hell for the entire next year. One of them said after seeing the actual changes in the script, she refused to go see that movie when it came out. It was a nightmare for them. So again, my advice is do what it takes to stay on the project. That is so much more important than trying to protect some words on page 32. So just keep that in mind. Often what they'll do is they'll give you the script, right? You'll read it. You will then give your take and then be hired to do the rewrite based on your take. Now, I've been involved in a whole bunch of these. I have taken writers through this process. What it comes down to is there was something about the previous version, right, that this original writer did that didn't work for the producer. And your job is to find out what that is and to give a take that meets what they need, right? I had an interesting meeting, and let me just tell you about this one because I think it'll help. I brought a writer in. A producer called me up, and a big producer, and he said, he says, I know you're teaching writers how to write these scripts and everything else. He says, do you have anybody who's really great at horror? And I said, yes, tell me what you're looking for. And so he gave me his criteria, right? And he had 3 specific things that he needed. And so I started, in my mind, it's like we've had lots and lots of writers go through our horror class. I started with that list and brought it down to the ones I knew who had worked with producers. So that took us to the second level. And then with the things that he said he needed, he had 2 things that he needed that required a specialist, somebody who knew how to do one specific kind of thing. And that brought it down to 2 writers. I brought one of them into a meeting, and she was sitting next to me, right? The producer and the director are sitting across from us. She had read the script the night before. And she said, I read the script. Would you like me to give you a pitch? Right? So she was going to give her take. So she gave her pitch, lasted about 3 minutes. She took him through how she would change it. And he sat there for a moment. And then he just shakes his head and he goes, I hate it. He says, no, that's nothing like close to what I want. Now, she had made a mistake. She didn't ask him up front what he wanted, but she recovered well. So she goes, okay, what are you trying to accomplish and what can I do for you? And he goes, good question. So he spent the next 5 minutes telling her all the things that he wanted to change in the script. She's writing them down like crazy over there while her dinner is getting cold. And at the end of 5 minutes, she kind of read through and organized her notes. He now started eating. And at one point she looked up and she said, would it be okay if I gave you a different pitch for this? And he goes, sure. He says, you got till I'm done with my chicken nuggets here. They weren't chicken nuggets, by the way. They were chicken strips, but that's what he said. And so she gave him a pitch. And this time she incorporated all the improvements he had just said, and she built them into the structure of the story. So essentially, he had asked for about 15 things to change. She just told him the structure of the story with every one of those things built in. And at the end of it, he sat back and he looked at her and he goes, wow. He goes, that was one of the best turnarounds I've ever seen. I love it. You're hired. Now, I was a little shaken. It was like, wow, he just 100% complete change in the way he behaved. But the reason why was because her take addressed exactly what he needed. Now, that's important. I asked him later on, and he said, you know what that showed me? He says, it showed me a couple of things. First, she's really good, right? She knows what she's doing when it comes to story. She was able to take one story and turn it into something completely different. He said, second, it showed me that she honored what I thought was important and what I needed. And that meant something also. But the third thing it showed me was she really considered what I needed, which means we will be able to work together throughout this entire process. And he not only hired her, and they went through that whole thing, but he recommended her to two other producers who both ended up making movies with the writer. So this stuff is really important to make sure you have. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off and telling you a whole bunch of different things here, but I just wanted to make sure you know it. Third possibility is to adapt novels, comics, etc. We've had people who've been hired to write screenplays for board games, and you know, there's been board game movies made. We just saw an incredible movie called Barbie that was about dolls, right? So you know, it's absolutely possible to be able to come from almost any place. So for this one, you know, many of the big movies have come from adaptations. If you look at all the Marvel movies, they have come from comics, right? Most of the $100 million movies you see that are not superhero movies have come from novels. And they're novels that were bestsellers, that were huge successes, that bring in a built-in audience. So to get hired, in this case, you read the book and you present your take to the producer. Now, obviously, this means you had to have gotten into the door first, but this is a really, really strong way to be able to work in this industry. Success, in this case, means you get right to the essence of the story and the characters and what will sell the movie. So again, you need to understand those kinds of things. You need to understand what sells a movie, because when you're talking with producers, that's what they're thinking about. Keep this in mind. I'll tell you the biggest disconnect between producers and writers. In general, writers are thinking about the story and the characters, and producers are thinking about the business journey, right? So the two journeys, it's like the writer writes the story, gets it to a certain point, and the writing journey is pretty much over. And now we go into the business journey. And most people think now we go into production. It's not true. Where you go immediately after the writing journey is into the business journey. It's the producer trying to get funding. It's them trying to get distribution, trying to get actors to sign on, trying to get a director involved, trying to get other producers to partner with them, right? There's a whole bunch of things that happen that are part of the business journey. So that's what the producer is thinking about. And if you can present this, and by the way, we have full classes on this because it's so important. If you can present your pitch through what will sell the movie, not saying things like, oh, it's going to be a blockbuster, you know, it's going to win an Academy Award. Don't say things like that. But presenting it in a way that they instantly go, okay, this thing will sell if this writer's on board. If you can do that, you're in business. Now, one caution. Don't adapt anything that you or the producer don't have the rights to in a written agreement. This is so important. You have no idea how many people come to me and they say, well, the script I wrote before I met you was based on a best-selling novel that hasn't been made into a movie yet. And I'll just ask this one question. Do you have the rights in writing? And they'll go, no, I thought the producer would do that. And it's like, this is the problem. If the producer gets the rights, they're already connected to a lot of writers that are already professional. So they would likely go to one of them. If you don't have the rights, don't waste your time adapting anything. That's just a safety tip. This is another one. Write a producer's idea. Now, at one point, I didn't know that, early on, I didn't know that this was something that was possible. And a producer, I was interviewing this one producer. We were talking about a movie that had just come out. And I said, so how did this project originate? And she goes, well, I was, when I was a young kid, I had met these people who were involved in something like this. When I first got into this industry, kind of wrote up a treatment on it, and people said, wow, that's really good, but we need a script. And she goes, I had no idea how to write a script. So she said it was on the back burner. Along the way, a writer pitched her on one of his scripts and then asked her, when she turned it down, he asked her, do you have any ideas or anything that you would like to have written? And she said, I remembered that one project. And so I gave him the treatment and said, see what you can do with this. He came back and he had written a complete pitch for it. He had written an outline for it. And she said she just went with it and they started working together. Now, let me pause so this is clear. That writer had never had any success in this industry before. He had never had any movies made. He had never had anything optioned. He just asked that question right at the right time. So I was doing a whole series of interviews at that point in front of audiences. We had 20 producers I was interviewing right in a row over a 3-day period. So I just asked every single one of them, do you have any ideas that you need a writer for? Every producer that we ask said yes to that. So keep this in mind. They're in the middle of doing all kinds of things, and sometimes ideas pop into their head. Once you start interacting with producers, this is an easy way to get in a door. If they like your writing and you can show them that you can do things and work with them, you've got a real chance. So again, producers have ideas, but a lot of times they don't have the time to do it or the skills. And this is important. There are a lot of producers in this industry who can't write. They can give notes. They understand what it takes to get a movie made. They know how to get it funded. They know all the things you need them for, but the things that you're great at, they need you, right? So just keep that in mind. Essentially what this does is it gives you a writing gig with a producer already attached. Because if the producer had that idea, right, essentially they're the producer on that project. They own the idea in that situation. They're attached to the project. And because it's their idea, they're going to be passionate about it and want to get the movie made. So this is like a dream gig. It's you and the producer creating together. You use the producer as this, essentially as a brainstorm partner. And in the meantime, you end up getting something made. So it's pretty amazing. Here's the next version. And this one's actually pretty interesting. Work for an actor or a director. Let me give you 2 stories here. I met these 2 writers, a guy named Kurtzman and Orsi, and you may know who they are. But I met him. When I met him, I had no idea who they were. I was doing some interviews on the lot of Universal, and we had somebody who was bringing these people in for me. He was the wrangler, and I was supposed to interview Charlize Theron's company. And he comes to me, the wrangler, and he says, Charlize Theron's company canceled. And he says, I don't have anyone else. But he says, there are these two guys. He says, I don't know much about them. But, they did work on a show called Xena Princess Warrior. And I remembered that show from a long time before. And so it was like, okay, I guess I'm interviewing writers instead of producers today. So no problem. So we brought them in. We sat down. I had a whole audience. And I said, so I heard you guys worked on Xena Princess Warrior. Tell us about that. How'd you get the job? What happened? What was it like? What'd you learn? All those kinds of things. So I got to about 20 minutes in. It was an hour-long interview. And I said, so anything else? And they said, well, yeah, we also were the head writers for Alias. And I was like, really? Oh, wow. Talk with us about that. So we get to the end of that. And I said, so what's next for you guys? And they said, well, we just made a deal with Tom Cruise for Mission Impossible 3. And I was like, oh my God, holy crap. I thought in the beginning I was just working with a couple of guys that were just had one little success. And it turned out they were amazing. They were hotshots. And they walked us through exactly how the meeting went with Tom Cruise, what they had to do in order to make that thing happen, what it was like going through the working process with the producers and with Tom Cruise, because he got approval on everything. And it was an incredible story. That was a situation where they got the job from an actor. The actor brought them into the project and he approved them doing the writing. So this is one way to go. You can do that with actors or directors. Let me give you a second story. Because again, some of these things you never know where they're going to come from. So I'm interviewing this guy. His first name is Dean. I'll tell you his last name in a minute. But I'm interviewing Dean and I said, Dean, how'd you get your start? And he says, I was in Germany. And he said, I always wanted to be an actor and I really couldn't get on any movies here in Los Angeles. So he says, while I was in Germany, they tell me that there's this low budget indie being shot by this director who hardly speaks English. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he says, I was trying to learn German at the time, so I thought this might be useful. So we went in, we did a read through on the script, and the dialogue was very, very cryptic English. So he said, I went to the director and I said, would it be okay if I rewrote some of my lines to make them better English? And the director says, oh, yeah, please do. So he said, overnight, I went through and rewrote all my lines. He said, the next day, when we did the very first scene, my lines were better than everybody else's. And so all the other actors went to the director and said, whoever wrote his lines, we need them to write our lines. So the director then brought him on as a co-writer, and he rewrote all the lines. Now, this movie was a low budget movie being done in Germany that ended up getting like a small amount of television time, that kind of thing. It didn't end up doing very well. But he said about a year later, he's back in Los Angeles and he gets a call from this director. And the director asked him if he'd be willing to write a script for him. And he said, sure. He says, I'm an actor, right? And the director said, you can act in the script, in the movie too, but I need you as a writer. So he said yes. And he wrote a script called Universal Soldier. You may remember it if I think it had Jean John Von Don or John Don. I can't remember his Von. Yeah. So the martial artist that I'm missing up his name. So he wrote that script. So that went well. And the director came back to him and said, you know what? I really enjoyed working with you. I have this other idea. Would you be willing to write it with me? And you can be a producer on the project. So they flew to Mexico and spent a month on a beach and wrote that script together. And that one was called Independence Day. Now, the writer was Dean Devlin, who is now a producer on a bunch of different movies and TV shows. And the director was Roland Emmerich, who ended up making Independence Day. So I'm interviewing Dean. I interviewed him at his office first, but later on we had this big thing where there was an anniversary of Independence Day, and I interviewed him in front of an audience of about 500 people who had come to see the movie and listen to his stories. And one of the things he said was, which I thought was incredibly interesting, I said, so Dean, Independence Day, how did that work out for you? And he goes, because I was both writer and producer, that movie made me wealthy. And everybody kind of laughed. And then he said, no, it actually made me wealthy. He says, I've been able to do anything I wanted since then. So this kind of stuff makes a difference. Hooking up with an actor who's on the way up or a director who's on the way up could get you where you want to go. Now, with an actor, sometimes you might just get hired by an actor just to rewrite their role, or and this happens with a lot of big actors where you express the character and the actor's unique take on it, right? So a lot of big actors have their own writer who does stuff like that. With a director, your job is going to be to express their vision. And that means, there's a script already. The director wants to make it their own, which, by the way, I really don't like that whole way of thinking. But at the present moment in this industry, there's not much we can do about it. So you want to get really good at being able to express their vision, and then because of it, getting a writing credit, getting paid, and working with that director on project after project after project. And then number 6, punching up scripts. I have a friend who lives in Iowa. He spent a lot of time here in Los Angeles working in the industry, but he ended up connecting with a bunch of producers that he has done this one job for. And so he said, here's what happens. A producer will call him up and say, hey, we're about to go into production. I need you to punch up this part of this script. I'm sending the script over along with a check for $15,000. Right. And it's a weird thing. He said he's made everything from 5,000 all the way up to 50,000 punching up a script. So they'll come in and they'll say things like, we need you to punch up the dialogue for this one character. We need you to improve the action, or we need you to make the structure stronger, or whatever it is, right? There'll be something that they need, and he's got a week to do it. And he just goes high speed. He's got an incredible reputation. And he says this makes him enough money where he can basically work for about 5 weeks out of the year, and he doesn't have to do any other work. So it's an interesting way of doing things. So this could be improving comedy dialogue, could be rewriting the female dialogue, especially if you've had a male writer who doesn't really understand certain things, could be rewriting lead characters, and whatever they need. It could also be rewriting the action. It could be rewriting certain scenes that are incredibly important to them, and will help make the movie successful. So, and then number 7, ghostwriting screenplays. Uh, and again, this is something, just looking at the word ghostwriting, what you know is you're not going to get credit for that. You're essentially a writer for hire, but without being credited on the script, right? And there's a reason that you would do this. It's called making money. It gives you a chance to work with a producer and then submit other projects to them or be hired in other ways. But usually when this is happening, a lot of the time somebody wants you to ghostwrite something. It's because they're the director and they want to get a writing credit, but they're not as good a writer as you, or something like that, right? There's some reason that they need to hide that they're not a writer. And in that case, that gives you a chance to step in the door. You're going to get more money because you're not getting credit. So that's important. You don't ghostwrite for free, and you don't ghostwrite on spec. If somebody's asking you to ghostwrite, the majority of the money should be paid to you, by a check or cash or whatever. So that's important. Now, ghostwriting, you could be brought on on an hourly basis. Like if you get down to it, my friend in Iowa, he's basically ghostwriting. He's doing it for some very specific things where he's punching up things. But you could get paid on an hourly basis or based upon a quote, right? Or based upon a draft. They could say, here, we'll give you this amount per draft. And you have some kind of step deal. For each draft, you get paid X amount of dollars, right? And as long as it's enough for you to be able to do that job and you know what you're doing, you're going to be happy. Again, don't ghostwrite on spec, right? Because if somebody's asking you to write a screenplay and they're telling you you're not going to get credit, but you're doing it on spec, and on spec means you're essentially saying, I'll wait until the movie gets made for me to make money. On ghostwriting, don't do that. Ghostwriting, the only benefit you're really getting besides knowing the producer is money. So don't put your money off. If they ask you to do something on spec and you know the producer and you know they can make the movie, then say, yes, I'd be willing to do that, as long as I get credit and whatever other things you want, right? It should be set up in a way that because you're taking a risk with them, you get paid for that. So as in over time, it makes it worthwhile. So yeah. And then if possible, negotiate some kind of credit, right? So associate producer, special thanks. We had somebody who got credit for specific dialogue, and it's like writing dash dialogue, and so at least they got something. So try for this. It doesn't mean you'll get it, especially if their whole purpose is to try to make themselves a bigger star. But at least give it a try and see if they respond to it. Now that you know these, let's talk about how you get these. To get these gigs, somehow you've got to get in front of producers or directors or actors or whoever is making the decision. And there's so many ways to do it. And I'll just give you a bunch of thoughts here. Volunteering at film festivals. We had one person who did this. Volunteered at a film festival. At one point along the way, he was standing next to a producer who was about to go on stage. He introduced himself. When the producer came off stage, he said something really positive to the producer, and they got into a conversation. He ended up getting a paid writing gig out of it. They went through a process that took about a month and a half before he got it, but that was the start, right? Working with organizations that interact with producers, directors, and actors. If you have a local organization that's interacting with producers, directors, and actors, hook up with them. If you're in Los Angeles, of course, you already know how to network, because anybody who's even here came here for that reason. Uh, Showing up for public read-throughs. We have had people who helped a producer do a read-through and ended up getting a writing gig out of it. So that's worthwhile. Marketing your scripts to producers, and right now I won't go into all the ways to do that, but there are just so many different ways to get scripts in the doors nowadays. Not right this second, but in a few months there will be. So this is, when you're marketing, by the way, that's you building a network. So keep that in mind. There are a lot of writers who think you have to build a network first and then you market to them. That is one way to do things. So I don't disagree with that, but I'm going to tell you, we had so much more success by marketing projects to producers and getting them excited about those projects and then wanting to work with us later on. So that's how we got in the door to all the studios, all the major production companies in this town. We got 35 different scripts in the door. But the reason we were able to do that, and this is back when Cheryl and I were producing, the reason we were able to do that was because we marketed the first 3 scripts that I wrote. And that got us in those doors and built a reputation. So objective B is then present yourself professionally. So let me just give you a couple of tips here. Because a lot of times when somebody says, well, give me your pitch, I've seen so many writers who think that means, please tell me your whole story. I want you to know, inside this industry, there are specific kinds of pitches. And if somebody just asks you, okay, so what is it that you're pitching? They're not asking you to spend 5 to 10 minutes telling you the story. And I'll tell you what I think they're asking for. You want to be mindful of their time. If you end up meeting with a producer and you've never met with them before, I would assume 1 to 2 minute pitches, and 2 minutes is maximum. You should be able to easily pitch anything in that span of time if you've got a project that can sell in this industry. So that means you need to know how to pitch those, and you need to know what it is. The biggest deal that we ever made was with the largest company in town for television. And I had optioned the rights, the life story to a particular person, and set it up as a potential TV project. I had a TV Bible, the whole thing. We'd written the pilot, all of that. But when I went in to do the pitch, Cheryl had made some calls, got us into this big company. The VP was going to listen to the pitch, and I thought we had 15 minutes. Now, I think she had said she would meet with us for 15 minutes, and that was why. When I got there, the VP comes over to us and she says, hey, it's going to be a little bit here. I'm sorry about that, but the good news is I got you into the president of the company. And I was like, okay, wow. And she goes, so why don't you guys go to lunch, come back in 60 minutes, and you can meet with the president. And I was like, okay. So we went to lunch, and I put together a 1-minute pitch because I knew we were meeting with the most important person in that company, and their time is incredibly important to them. We went back in, we sit down with the president. She asked us where we were from. And at that point, we had been, we had just come from Austin, Texas, like 3 or 4 years before that. And by then I knew the business. I knew what I was doing. So we chit-chatted for about a minute about 6th Street in Austin, Texas, and how much she loves the food there. And then she said, so what do you have? I said 1 sentence, and it ended with a punchline. She laughed. When she finished laughing, I said a second sentence that also ended with a punchline. She laughed again, and then she turned to the VP and she goes, can you get me the president of ABC on the phone? I want to talk with him about this project. And then she looked back to me and she goes, I'm assuming you want to work with us. And I said, absolutely. And she goes, great. Here's what I'll do. I'm going to have this conversation with the president of ABC. Then I'm going to come back to you and I'll have our business affairs person call you and we'll put together an agreement. And I said, absolutely, that'd be great. Let me know what you need. That was it. We spent the next 2 weeks working on an agreement. They took it in. We actually got it all the way to the top of ABC and the studios. And sadly enough, at that point, there were about 100 projects for 10 slots, and we didn't end up getting it. And that's the sad part. But the good part is, you know what? We could get anything into that production company from that point on. So when you present, if you present yourself professionally, they're going to want to work with you from now on. And here's the last part: only pitch if it's appropriate. And I just want to say that because if you're chasing somebody into an elevator and, and cornering them to pitch, and they didn't know they were going to be in a pitching meeting, that's probably not so appropriate. So, there's a time to pitch. There's a time when it's right. There's a time when they're happy to listen to you. And in my mind, it's almost always when they ask me, right? I've had multiple conversations with producers where they didn't ask me to pitch. And it was like, all right, you know what? We've worked together or we've interacted or we've done things and we're just chit-chatting about, them, what it's going to take for them to win their tennis game or something. And it's like, okay, that was a social meeting. But the moment that they asked me to pitch, I've already got something prepared. I know exactly where I'm going. I know what to say. I know how to close it. And I know how to make that deal. So that's important. And a lot of it just comes down to having a short pitch that goes right to the big hook that you're presenting. Do that, and you have a good chance of being in business. Now, all of this, everything we've been talking about, depends upon your understanding of the writing assignment process. And this is where it's, if you know how to do this, if you know how to do writing assignments, you have such a much better chance of success in this industry. I can tell you like 15 of our writers who tried and tried and tried to get in major doors, tried to make things happen. And after a couple of years, hadn't yet sold a screenplay, who, when we introduced this whole writing assignment thing, ended up getting movies made. And in fact, here, I'll just go to the biggest one. And this isn't the biggest one. Let me tell you three. Nicole Jones-Dion is a writer who knows what she was doing. She was fairly successful in contests and those kinds of things, but she hadn't made a deal yet. Once she learned how to do this and started doing writing assignments, she's had multiple writing assignments and 4 movies made from those. So she now is at a higher level in this industry because of this. We have a writer named Don McNabb Stark, who is in England. He started doing writing assignments, and after a year and a half, he quit his corporate job because he was making more money doing writing assignments. He has gone on to do over 25 paid writing assignments for producers. Once you get this down, once you know what you're doing, right, this is something that is needed out there. And so the last one I'll tell you about, and this one is one we're going to offer as a bonus on this class that's coming up, is I did an interview with Anthony Catino, who is one of our writers, who got a gig with an international producer, and ended up, throughout the interview, he told us exactly step by step how he did that process, how he worked with that producer, how they did all this on Zoom, the deadlines they were under, all of those kinds of things. But that movie ultimately got made and came out about a year ago on Netflix International. And since then, it has won 4 Academy Awards in India. So it has changed his whole life that he did this. It makes a huge, huge difference. So if what you want to do is to be able to break into this industry, stay with me for a minute, And let me just walk you through what I consider to be the easiest way to get in this industry. Because paid writing assignments, you can do these all the way from the bottom, working with small producers who are maybe making their second movie, and you're doing the writing on that particular project, all the way to the very top, working with, Marvel and making the next Iron Man. Right? Those are all paid writing assignments. Every producer that I know of has at some point had some writer do a paid writing assignment. So this is something that could change your life and give you the actual access that you've always wanted. So let me just walk you through it. The vision of this class is that you know the writing assignment process better than the producer, right? This is, when we created this program, I interviewed 25 producers right in a row about writing assignments. And these were producers that had done major writing assignments. I interviewed a bunch of A-list screenwriters. Then I interviewed 5 writers who had had at least 5 writing assignments with smaller producers to find out how that was different. And if you're trying to break in, how you could get in those doors to make your first deal. So we wanted to make sure that you know this process better than anyone else, so you're the pro in the room. So here's how this class goes. Day 1, you're going to learn exactly how paid writing assignments work, right? And today I was just talking about the opportunities. Here, we're going to talk about how you do them. Day 2, then it's about how do you create credibility in this industry? Because I think a lot of people don't know that you can create your own credibility. You can build credibility in a systematic way so that if you have none right now, if you have 0, over the next 3 to 6 months, you could build enough credibility to get in the doors of a lot of the small production companies that are out there. And that may give you your first deal, which will then get you to the bigger production companies. Day 3 is about choosing your specialty. And this is something that you want to know. Whatever you're best at, if a producer's trying to hire you, they're going to want you to do what you're best at, right? And it's a lot easier going in saying, here's my specialty. Here's the thing I'm great at. And we're going to walk you through not only how to choose your specialty, but then how to get twice as good at it so that you really do become the expert in the room. Day 4 then is about the key business decisions in a script. Now, let me just give you a couple so you know. Budget is a business decision, right? It's an obvious one because we're talking about money. But let me also tell you, the title is also a business decision. If you have an average title, and especially if a producer has an average title, they're going to think, whatever religious deity they believe in, because you helped them come up with a better title. That increases the chance that this thing can sell and get produced, right? There's like 12 business decisions that you need to know about that producers are talking about all the time. And this is something that we learned along the way. If a writer doesn't understand those business decisions, they don't understand why the producer wants you to make changes. It's really important. Once you learn these, you're going to know how to talk to producers. You're going to know what matters to them most, what they need, and exactly how to accomplish it so that you're the most valuable person in the room. Then it's about creating a writing sample that can get you hired. Now, most people who don't know much about this, if you said, what is a writing sample? They would say, whatever script you've written, just present your script. I'm going to tell you, yes, you can do that, but your writing sample needs to be done in a particular way that is going to cause them to see you as a pro. So this is really important. So the main thing that we're presenting here is how do you go from having something that's doing okay in contest to something that when you hand it to a producer, they say, oh my God, I've got to hire this writer. We had one writer who went to a producer, a big action producer. He got in the door and then the producer read his script and the producer only read 10 pages of the script and turned him down. And he came back to me and he said, Am I going to learn something in this writing assignment class that can actually get me back in that door? And I said, yes, you're going to learn a whole bunch of things that can get you in the door. But based on your story, you're going to learn how to write a writing sample that will sell you. So here's what happened. He ended up going back to that script and rewriting just 10 pages of it. He went back to the producer who hadn't read the rest of the script. He rewrote the midpoint is what he rewrote. And it had a big action scene in it. He went back to the producer and he said, just read 10 pages. And it took about 3 weeks for him to talk the producer into it. The producer read 10 pages and hired him to do a $10 million movie, to write the script on a $10 million movie. So this stuff is absolutely possible. Every single thing I'm going to give you here makes a difference. Number 6 then is how to be invaluable to producers. And this is about how you work with them, how you think with them, how you talk with them. There are certain things that if you understand those, you're going to be a star. If you don't understand those, you're just going to keep getting bumped out of the room. So we'll give you the whole list. You will know exactly who to be and how to be, and still maintain who you are as a professional writer. This isn't about sucking up. It's about who you bring, what you bring to the table to get this movie made. So that makes a big difference. Then you'll go through the process of mastering writing treatments. Often in the midst of the writing assignment process, the way you audition is through a treatment. A lot of times they'll say, here's my idea. Here's what I think the project is about. Here's what I think will sell it. Write me a treatment. And if you can write a great treatment, they're going to want to work with you. So I interviewed 15 producers about what goes into that treatment. What exactly do they need? So you will be going in writing a better treatment than 99% of the writers coming in the door knew. On 8, then it's about decreasing budget in a script. And 95% of the time that there's a budget change, it's a decrease. Every once in a while, you'll have something lucky like, okay, we were going to do this movie for $5,000, and then Tom Cruise, or $5 million, and then Tom Cruise signed on and it just went to 100. And it's like, okay, you'll know how to do that too if you need to. But the bigger problem is decreasing budget. And so this happens when a producer loses part of their budget. They may have 3 different sources funding it. One of them drops out. And now suddenly they went from a $10 million movie down to a $4 million movie, and they need to do some things. What can they cut from this script that will decrease the budget? Once you understand this, you will be the pro in the room at this moment. You will be the one who can look at the script and figure out a way to cut $6 million from a $10 million budget and have that movie be just as good or better. And that makes you somebody who's incredibly valuable to that team. On the 9th day, then it'll be about taking notes from producers. And we're masters at this, really. In the beginning, I had no idea, but I'd done corporate training for years, so I always took notes from vice presidents and presidents of major corporations. So I never had a problem with it in the first place. But what we did was I interviewed about 25 A-list screenwriters about how they take notes, how they think, how they navigate when a studio gives them crazy ideas, right? What do they do in order to make this whole process work for the producer and for themselves to maintain their vision? This will, first, it'll make you a pro in the room. Second, it will also have you feeling completely confident, and it will mean you're in charge. So really, it makes such a huge difference if you know what you're doing on that. On the 10th day, then it's going to be about how do you make the deal and pricing strategies. I'm going to tell you, most writers blow it when it comes time to trying to make the deal. They think it's about something else. They have no idea what the deal points are. They have no idea what matters in that situation. They have no idea when they're getting a good deal, when they're not getting a good deal. All of that's going to be solved on this day. and you're going to learn some things about pricing strategies in case they just start out the conversation with, how much do you charge? Because that's like kind of a daunting question, and you need to know how to respond to it, right? So we've got responses. We know exactly how this stuff works. And we've helped I think we've had about 150 writers who have made their first paid writing assignment deal. And then out of them, probably 60 of them have made a second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth deal after that. So we know how that process works. And then finally, it's how do you present your services to producers? How do you market to producers to get in the door so they're at least considering you? Now, I'll tell you up front, if somebody comes to us and says, oh, I only want to work for the studios, I'm going to tell you, if you don't know any of this stuff, you have zero chance. Second, if you don't already have some kind of credibility, some kind of successes, it's really hard to get into the biggest doors at the top. Our strategy is pretty simple. There's like 4 different levels of this industry. We start on the bottom so that you get comfortable, so you know what you're doing, so you're not in heavy stress situations. You're working with a producer who's making a $5 million movie. And out of that kind of situation, it's not as bad as if you're in a situation where, they're making a $100 million movie and your script is going to either make it or break it. This is something where you start at the smaller levels, you learn what you're doing, you get really good at it, you build reputations, and you get comfortable working with producers, and then you naturally move up. Because once you're good at level 1, you go to level 2. And once you're good at level 2, you go to level 3. And in the meantime, you're going to be building credibility that gets you into the bigger doors. And by the time you're done, you could possibly get into those big doors that you've always wanted to. Now, this program normally is $250. Let me just tell you, it's starting on September 25th. That gives you a little bit of time to start to work on, what kinds of projects do you already have, to watch the interview that I'm going to send you with Anthony Catino, where he walks through exactly how he got his deal, and then how he went through the steps of working with that producer, taking notes, making changes, dealing with budget things, dealing with the director, all of those kinds of things, all the way to the point of finishing it and getting a movie made that ended up getting 4 Academy Awards in India. So it's like, you know what? He just had a hell of a journey because he learned and mastered all this stuff. And he has said over and over, he could not have done it without learning these skill sets. So the normal price on this is $250. Let me give you a special. For those of you who would like to be able to learn this process and then make use of it, because my job is to encourage you to take those steps and to move forward and to become as successful as you can. We'll give you a special price on this. We'll give you $100 off, so you can get in for $150. It saves you $100. This class, you are going to love what you learn. It's a 1-month-long class that will make you a better writer for the rest of your life. It will also make you incredibly competent at dealing with producers. All those things that you're afraid they may say to you, you will know all the answers to. You will know exactly what's going on at all times. So you will go in the door as somebody who really understands this process as good or better than they do. So if that's important to you, if that's valuable to you, just all you got to do is go to this link and you just write it down, bit.ly, bit.ly/WA class. Put that link in your browser where you normally put a web address, click return, come join us. Again, right now you can get in for $100 off. That is for the first 20 people. After that, it bumps up to, to 200. So then you'll still get 50 off. And then it goes through 20 people, and then it bumps up to the full price. If you end up paying the extra 50 or the extra 100, I promise you, it's still worth it. It really is absolutely worth it. Because what this will do for your competence level, for your understanding, and for your ability to be in the room with those producers, it will do magic for you. So I hope you've already enjoyed what we've been talking about. I hope this has already made a difference for you and gives you, the chance to see a bunch of different ways that you can succeed in this industry. This is something that I needed when I first got here. I wish I would have had it. I actually turned down a couple of paid writing assignments because I didn't know what they were talking about. If I would have had this class, it would have made a tremendous difference. So I want to be able to make that difference for you. So listen, thank you guys for being with me. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, wishing you the absolute best in your writing. Bye-bye, everyone.